as governor, I went in, we had lost 350,000 jobs. Now we're up over 400,000 jobs, and our wages are growing faster than the national average. Those issues can be addressed by balancing budgets, by reforming regulations, by making sure that you cut taxes. By balancing that federal budget, by sending power and money and influence to some degree as much as we could against a president who was opposed to us. We paid down the largest amount of the publicly held debt in modern history.
John Kasich continues to look back at his record as he moves forward in the race. Will he be able to replicate this success and balance the federal budget? Here to weigh in is the chair of King's College Business and Finance Program in Manhattan and my main man, Brian Bremberg. We've been breaking this down all week for us. Brian, you've been looking at all the candidates. John Kasich, where does he compare?
So look, we've looked at all the candidates. They have big, eye-popping plans. Kasich has a plan, too. He wants to cut the top marginal tax rate down to 28%, wants to cut the corporate tax rate down to 25%, capital gains rate down to 15%. So he's got all the big elements that the other candidates have.
The tax-cutting portion.
But what he really wants to do, he really wants to run on his record. He doesn't want to run on his plan. He wants to run on his record.
Sure.
What he's done at the federal level back in the late 90s, what he did in Ohio over the past few years. And so that's kind of the different tack that he's taking relative to the other candidates in the race.
And his plan of balancing budgets before. What implication would his balancing the budget for him have on his tax?
Yeah, the case he's trying to make is, look, if we balance budgets, we don't have to worry about government borrowing. We know that the government borrows, it can crank up interest rates. That makes it more difficult for businesses to access capital. He wants to create a business environment that's strong, and he thinks that balancing the budget is part of that.
Does he attribute for balanced budget toward growth? Does he feel like balancing that budget will lead to a boom, or is it just one part of it?
It's part of laying the groundwork. I think what he's saying is business is going to lead us out of this slow growth economy, business investment, job growth. The government's not going to lead that. The private sector is going to lead that. Our job in the government is to create the space for that to happen, and part of that is living within our means, not jacking up interest rates because government borrowing is crowding out private.
So obviously debt and deficits is a huge issue at the national level. Has he presented a comprehensive plan to get at balancing a federal budget?
He's talking about cuts. He wants to move a lot of, as you heard in the clip, he wants to move a lot of the spending down to the states. He wants to reform Medicare. He has some ideas about reforming Social Security. So he's talking about the big issues that you have to talk about if you really want to balance the budget long term and get debt under control. Of course, everything changes when you're in office and you actually are trying to do it and you're working with the other side. That remains to be seen, but he's talking about the right things.
I know at debates he's talked about entitlement reform in Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security in ways others candidates have not. On the scale of all the candidates, where does the Kasich plan rank on sort of economic growth? They all talk about economic growth as the holy grail. Is this the best plan, one of the best? There's only 4 left.
Well, it's much more moderate than some of the other Republican plans. He's not going to a flat tax rate. He's not eliminating capital gains rate, so he's probably not going to get quite as much growth out of that. On the other hand, it probably stands a better chance of actually passing if you're not going to that extreme. So maybe not as ambitious, but maybe focus on, hey, what can we get done, actually?
Interesting. So it's not a comprehensive flat tax as some others have proposed, but it's decreases in marginal tax rates.
Yeah, he wants to take
the budget.
Take the 7 brackets down to 3, and the top rate at 28. He hasn't talked about what the other 2 rates are going to be, presumably lower than they are today. But it's a less ambitious plan, probably a more realistic plan, and that's kind of been his approach the whole time. I'm the guy who gets things done.
Absolutely. Brian, thank you.